process and the transition starts next year or this coming season as far as just going about it, taking over, being the focal point, yeah, it's still going to fall into LeBron James' hands. Like Paul said, like if he's on the team, LeBron James is your go-to guy, is your everything. But more practice, in due time, you'll see it change hands.
Well, look, the partnership that LeBron and Anthony Davis have together, it's something that, Brian, I don't feel like I have seen since he and Dwayne Wade really put their heads together and have really been all for one on just, I want you to do well, you want me to do well, we're going to steer this ship together. You get the sense with the Lakers that they really are of one mind, and Anthony Davis is such a good partner for LeBron. As you've looked at LeBron's career, Brian, over as an arc, is this the way you think he wants to spend that final batch of his career, sort of handing the keys over to Anthony slowly?
Yeah, there was a time, Rachel, I know that it sounds funny right now, but there was a time, maybe it was a day, maybe it was a month, where LeBron thought that this role was going to be played by Kyrie Irving, that he would slowly turn over the Cavs to Kyrie Irving, and that he would sort of age playing alongside him. Obviously, Kyrie did not want that and ended up leading LeBron out of town. This arrangement is very comfortable for LeBron, and it's no big deal now because we're all used to it, but when LeBron elected to go and switch to play point guard, a full-time, I know he played a little bit of point guard for most of his career, but to be full-time point guard, basically to make Anthony Davis more comfortable in year 17 to do that, that showed you how invested LeBron is in Anthony Davis' success, and I think it worked out pretty well.
There can always be mystery suitors that come in. The longer you wait, the more time opens up for a situation to go haywire somewhere else and for another team to want to jump in. There are a lot of teams that have, not a lot, but there are 3 or 4 teams we could probably name that have the assets to get James Harden or to at least get themselves in the conversation. But right now, it's just wait and see time.
One of the things that is just a reality about this is that James Harden has 2 years left on his contract. And while there have been players that have been able to force a trade with 2 years left on their contract in recent years, it doesn't give him maximum leverage. And so that means that the Rockets can wait for leverage to develop, whether that leverage develops because James Harden changes his mind, whether he widens his teams he's willing to go to, whether there's something else happens in the league. I think it's a smart play right now. It doesn't behoove the Brooklyn Nets to make their best offer when James says, I only want to go there. And it doesn't behoove the Rockets to negotiate in a closed market. So as a result, we're probably going to get, as Zach said, that waiting game.
You know, Rachel, beyond what Brian and Zach are pointing out, you know, I've talked to some people around Houston, and part of this also is that Tillman Fertitta feels very hurt by this, by the idea that, you know, he hired Steven Silas kind of as an olive branch with the players. He was leaning toward Jeff Van Gundy. They wanted Ty Lue. Ty Lue ended up with the Clippers, so they end up with Steven Silas as kind of like the compromise between the two different parties. And so the players signed off on it and then almost immediately said, yeah, by the way, trade us. And if that were the case from the beginning, well, then Tillman would have hired the guy he wanted to hire to start with. So I think part of this is beyond what Brian is talking about, leverage and negotiation, which I think is astute from Houston's perspective. Part of it also is like, no, to hell with that. I'm not sending you where you want to go. You're going to be here. And that, when you hear that statement of we're prepared for it to get uncomfortable, that is them sending out the flare that, yeah, that's right. I don't care what you say. We're going to make this real uncomfortable. I don't know if that's a good strategy of announcing it, but it does definitely indicate of the level of hurt from the Rockets' standpoint.
You know what? Yeah, that was a quote to our Tim McMahon. Paul, if you were James Harden, how would you play this?
Well, I mean, he's already played it the way he wants to play it. He's showed that he's been disgruntled. He's a superstar in this league, and these guys don't come about too often for the Houston Rockets. But if I'm Houston, it's hard for me to budge. Like I said, players of this caliber do not come to your franchise almost never. He's probably one of the top 3 players to ever put on a Houston uniform. And if you see him leave and go into a rebuild, I've seen teams rebuild for over 20 years, for a whole generation rebuild, because they don't have this type of player. And so hopefully there's some way they can work it out. But if not, you know, I can't imagine him being there before Christmas.
You know, the crazy thing is...
Well, look.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say,
go ahead,
the crazy thing is, though, we see this happen the other side. I get what Paul is saying, but also if he doesn't want to be there, you got a new coach who's trying to put in a new system. How much is he going to be bought into executing the new system or being amenable? We always talk about this. In the NFL, when a player doesn't like his deal or where he is, he sits out. In the NBA, when a player doesn't like a situation, he shows up and he makes things uncomfortable. And my standpoint is always the player can always make it way more uncomfortable for the team than vice versa, especially when you're a star like Harden.
Yes.
General soreness.
I hear you, and I know that's true. Yes, exactly, general soreness. I hear you, and I know that's true, and we've seen it with players certainly in the past. We saw Jimmy Butler, who said, you're trading me, right? He just forced his way out of Minnesota. We've seen Anthony Davis, who a year and a half before his deal was up, said, hey, trade me. But there is still the fact, and Brian and I have had, I think, approximately 306 conversations about if a guy has 2 years left on his contract, like with, say, Kyrie Irving. We talked about this a lot a few years ago. You don't have to deal him. And there is a point where an owner can say to the player, hey, guess what? You had us give up all these assets for Russell Westbrook. We got you Russell Westbrook. As you just described with the coaching situation, you had input on the coach. You made decisions differently than we might have made. You're going to play here for a little while. And we know that James Harden, to his credit, he shows up every day. He likes playing basketball. He likes scoring his points. And I would expect some natural buy-in from him just because he likes going out and hooping. So it is going to be interesting to see how this goes going forward. If he doesn't end up going to the Nets, though, Zach, how does that influence how the Nets play the next few months? I saw Bradley Beal tweet a few minutes ago, here we go. And honestly, my heart skipped a beat because any player tweeting anything right now, you're like, wait, what's going on? Do I need the siren? What's happening? Bradley Beal has said that he wants to stay in Washington and see how things work out with John Wall, but obviously he has been a target and a guy that people have mentioned in Brooklyn.
Well, look, if the Nets' best offer isn't enough to get James Harden, I'm not sure why it would be enough to get Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal is 5 or 6 years younger than James Harden and is coming into his own as a superstar, a legit superstar in the NBA. So it remains TBD if they can really get that on the table. We'll see. There are other teams, including the Denver Nuggets, I think, with Michael Porter Jr., who have at least one asset that trumps anything Brooklyn can throw out. Brooklyn needs to throw the whole kitchen sink unless you get to the point of throwing Kyrie in which case things have gone really crazy. But to your initial question, the Brooklyn Nets have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. We were throwing all parties in New York because they got these two superstars. It's not like they need a lot of help. They have two superstars. They're probably going to